Although I get mighty jumpy during horror games, I do kind of love them. I always need to know more, I always want to uncover the story, and yeah, I always get scared. But during the medium, I wasn't scared. Frustrated? Yes. Bored? Yes. Disappointed? Oh god, yes. But I wasn't scared. The Medium is a horror game, and when I say horror, I use that phrase entirely against my will for reasons I'll get onto later. That is no hit and all miss. Although there are occasional moments that show that Bloober's game has potential, this kinda just hurts as you can see what the Medium could have been. It's not the atmospheric, haunting horror it thinks it is. It's a confused walking sim with roadblocks instead of puzzles, a monster that's more of a pest than petrifying, and a story that can't decide how it wants to be told. Just a warning, near the end of this review I talk about the sexual assault of a minor that happens in the game. I'll be including a warning well in advance, so if that's not something you want to hear about, you will be able to skip it. So just listen out for that warning. So, here's our review of The Medium.
What the hell are you, Niwa?
The Medium is the story of Marianne, a medium who has been summoned to the Niwa hotel by someone called Thomas. A catastrophic massacre took place at the hotel decades ago, so the building has been left to decay. But something in the ruins is hungry for more. Thanks to her supernatural gifts, Marianne can switch between the spirit world and the real world, and has to navigate both to free the trapped souls in the hotel, figure out who Thomas is, why she was called here, and what is tracking her every move. There are things to like about The Medium, I promise. Claustrophobic fixed camera angles make it feel like you're looking through the eyes of something that's watching Marianne from afar. With the inability to preemptively look around corners or choose where the camera points, adding to the sense of dread at the beginning of the game when you first enter Niwa. That dread evaporates quickly when you realise that the camera angles, while inventive in the first couple of hours of the game, quickly become stale in their placement when they should really be exacerbating the crumbling, oppressive atmosphere of a place filled with so much suffering. Over time you'll find out what caused this massacre, and I won't spoil it, but God, when you even begin to question the source of this bloodshed just a little, it all unravels. Yet, even though the logic of plot points like that one, and a handful of others I can think of off the top of my head, is questionable at best, The Medium really wants you to drink in the narrative. So much so that when Marianne is monologuing, which she does a lot, you can't interact with anything else on the screen. Although I get the reasoning for this, that they want you to pay attention to what Marianne is thinking and feeling, it just makes you impatient, as you can see what you want to pick up and examine, but you have to wait for Marianne to get to the end of her train of thought before you can touch it. I don't understand why you couldn't have picked up objects while Marianne is still monologuing and just waited to hear what she wanted to say about them, but what can I say? It's what they went for. Buttons appearing only after Marianne is done talking is one of a couple of technical issues I've had with The Medium. One weird thing that kept happening was that I would have my new objective appear at the top of the screen, then disappear and have the old objective appear and be crossed out, which to me felt like it was doing things in completely the wrong order and straight up confused me to begin with. At certain points, textures glitched out on the Series X, which was disappointing, seeing as The Medium is a true Xbox Series X exclusive, but fails to maintain even basic graphical fidelity. More problems made me want to stop playing the game altogether. In one section, I apparently picked up clues in the wrong order, so the game wouldn't let Marianne figure out the name of a soul she's been trying to free, even though I knew what their name was using the clues I had already been given and could see the name written down in front of her. To fix it, I had to reload an earlier save from an hour ago and redo the clues all over again. Frustrated doesn't even begin to cover how I felt at that moment. Later on, there was an issue with the game failing to load my most recent autosave when I died, instead loading up a save from about half an hour ago, even though my most recent autosave was clearly in the load queue. What makes that even more baffling is that there are moments in the medium that show it could have been so much more, like this moment. See how it made you drink in the scene before something interrupted your curiosity, and how you weren't attacked immediately afterwards, so you're left with this feeling that you were intruding somewhere you shouldn't be? That's what I thought the medium would be. A collection of stories about spirits and how they fared in Niwa, with hints about their end like the razor in the bathtub, with the massacre spawning spirits that are stuck in their last feelings, whether they be of shame, sadness, or anger. It feels to me like the medium didn't know what kind of game it wanted to be. Nothing is committed to enough to make a lasting impression. Its puzzles aren't challenging, and even calling them puzzles is a bit of a stretch, to be honest, as they don't demand any kind of creative thinking from the player whatsoever. It's just a question of finding components A, B, and C by clicking on the on-screen prompts, then putting the square peg into the square-shaped hole. It's like the medium doesn't trust you with anything more complicated than that. Enemy encounters are just as basic. Dogging your footsteps is the more, but it doesn't crop up often enough to be an antagonist, and when it does appear, the sequences are over quickly. There's no randomness in its patrolling, so it's easy to sneak past. Battles with it are anticlimactic, as there's no foreshadowing about the tools that can stop it. So you can't plan any of your traps, you just get railroaded into the solution. You're not required to have any technique or timing with the traps you set off, and in a horror game that involves sneaking, that's bizarre. Usually, planning and forethought are the only things that give you an advantage over powerful enemies in these kinds of situations. But in the medium, you don't even get that. What it comes down to is that I never felt in danger. And in a horror game, that's pretty fundamental stuff. Later in the game, some sequences show what the medium could have been if it focused on the tormented spirits in the spirit world instead of half-hearted sneaking sections and a plot that unravels at the merest tug. Remaining as vague as I can be, at 2 points in the story, you enter the mind of certain characters. This spirit world of theirs reflects their psyches, and these parts are the best bits of the game, as everything is twisted in a horribly personal way, showing you the trauma they've been through. Their past distorts how these worlds look, and although the mechanics are just as fiddly and confrontations with their inner monsters are as anticlimactic as usual, I would have loved to see more personal spirit worlds like these. I will also mention Graham Vick, who puts on a great performance as Thomas. I can't say anything else, otherwise I'll spoil the story, but keep an eye out for his scenes. They have this fierce, electric quality and dynamism that you don't find in the rest of the game. Honestly, they're a silver lining in an otherwise subpar experience. Thomas is meant to be the focal point of the medium. You come to Niwa to find him and figure out why he contacted you, but after the first 2 hours, the path to Thomas becomes tangential and distracted, and you don't know how all this is supposed to lead you to him.
Hope you don't mind.
Initially, a big fuss is made about the mysterious massacre, but despite Marianne being proud of helping people cross over and be at peace, as was established in the tutorial, she becomes more preoccupied with what caused the massacre, as if helping its victims don't actually matter to her. These victims become a side note to Marianne's own past, which feels especially cruel in a game that puts so much emphasis on the gory violence that occurred at Niwa without considering that a medium might actually want to help spirits find peace, rather than unravel a mystery that initially doesn't appear to have anything to do with her. In horror games like Outlast, Amnesia, and Soma, and other games Bloober have made, like Layers of Fear and Observer, you get intimately close with how people were twisted into monstrous versions of themselves. By learning more about the victims of violence, experimentation, or their own self-destructive habits, you can empathise with them and mourn what they've lost, even though by the time you see them, they might have already turned into something monstrous. But the empathy and understanding about what they went through is still there, and you can even feel pity for some of them. The biggest issue I have with the medium concerns this topic and the sexual assault of a child, so if that's not something you want to hear about, skip to this time now.
Here you go. What's your face? Glad to see you're still kicking around.
In the medium, one of the psychological spirit worlds you explore is the mind of a man who sexually assaulted a young girl. You're shown the traumatic events he went through as a child himself, but the game never has the courage to tell you why those events turned him into a paedophile. Time is spent on exploring the disturbing childhood he went through, although thankfully the character exploring his mind is unsympathetic and doesn't give a shit about his past. You never see the young girl's perspective. You hear about it in passing a couple of times, but her trauma isn't dwelt upon with the same depth. Although this sexual assault is crucial to the main story, it's the paedophile's perspective that gets priority. I don't understand why the victim's experience, her psychological turmoil, and her personal horror weren't considered worthy of the player's time. It's another example of how the medium cares about titillating us with the taboo, rather than using horror to let us sympathise with victims' experiences. In all, the medium is not a game I'd recommend, especially not to horror fans. Its few silver linings, like Graham Vick's performance and some interesting psychological spirit worlds, don't make up for the confused storytelling, frustrating mechanics, and failed attempts at stealth horror. If the medium had chosen one thing to focus on in the horror genre, like puzzles, stealth, or psychological surroundings, then it could have been something better. But it didn't. And that's all there is, unfortunately. So, that was our review of the medium. If you enjoyed this review, thanks very much, and don't forget to like and subscribe because we here at Eurogamer have a new video out every single day. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go and do literally anything else, so I'll see you next time.